Why do I suddenly have a British accent? I knew something was wrong the moment I opened my mouth to order my usual grande pike place at Starbucks. Good morning, might I have a grande pike place roast, if you would be so kind? The barista, Jessica, according to her name tag, stared at me like I'd just spoken Mandarin. Which, considering I'd never used the phrase, if you would be so kind, in my entire 28 years of American existence, wasn't entirely unreasonable. Jake. Is that you? She squinted at me, her purple-streaked bangs falling into her eyes. You sound like, different. I cleared my throat and tried again. Sorry, yes, it's me. Just the coffee, please. But it happened again. Every word came out crisp and clipped, like I'd spent the last decade at Oxford instead of in a beige cubicle at Morrison & Associates Insurance. The vowels were all wrong, or rather, all too right, if you were aiming for BBC Newsreader rather than suburban Chicago. Dude, what's with the accent? Jessica giggled as she grabbed a cup. Did you watch too much Downton Abbey or something? I wanted to explain that I had no idea what was happening, that I'd woken up at 6:47 a.m. sounding like Hugh Grant's accountant, but instead what came out was, I'm afraid I haven't the foggiest notion what you mean. Haven't the foggiest notion? Who was I, the Queen's cousin? By the time I reached the Morrison building at 8:15 a.m., I tested my voice a dozen times in my Honda Civic's rearview mirror. Every attempt at normal speech came out increasingly British. Not just British, posh British. The kind of accent that ordered proper tea and complained about the weather with genuine enthusiasm. The elevator ride to the 4th floor felt like ascending to my execution. How do you explain to your boss that you've mysteriously developed an accent overnight? Especially when that boss is Derek Morrison Jr., a man who once called in sick because his fantasy football quarterback got injured, and who pronounces nuclear as nuclear despite having an MBA. I'd barely settled into my desk when Derek's voice boomed across the office. Henderson. My office, now. 23 heads swiveled toward me with the practiced synchronization of prairie dogs sensing danger. I caught Maria's sympathetic wince from 2 cubicles over and grabbed my coffee like a shield. Derek's office smelled like cheap cologne and the protein bars he constantly left unwrapped in his desk drawer. He didn't look up from his computer as I entered. Close the door. We need to discuss yesterday's incident. Yesterday's incident. Right. The reason I'd left work early, the reason I'd spent last evening with an ice pack pressed to the back of my skull, the reason I now apparently spoke like I'd been raised in a manor house. Sir, about that workers' comp form. Workers' comp? Derek's laugh was sharp enough to cut glass. For slipping on a little water. Christ, Henderson, grow a pair. The words that came out of my mouth surprised us both. I beg your pardon, but that little water caused me to strike my head rather severely on the filing cabinet. I should think a proper incident report would be the bare minimum of appropriate responses. Derek's fingers froze over his keyboard. He looked up slowly, his expression shifting from annoyed to bewildered to something approaching amusement. What the hell happened to your voice? The question hung in the air like smoke from Derek's vaping habit, which, incidentally, he indulged in despite the building's strict no-smoking policy that he'd helped implement 6 months ago. I'm afraid I don't understand what you mean, sir. The words continued flowing out in that crisp, measured cadence that seemed to bypass my brain entirely. Perhaps we could focus on the matter at hand. The incident report for my workplace injury. Derek leaned back in his chair, the springs squeaking in protest. A grin spread across his face, not the good kind, but the predatory smile he wore when he found something to exploit. Holy shit, Henderson. You sound like you should be serving tea to the Queen. He started laughing, a wheezing sound that made my teeth ache. What is this, some kind of midlife crisis thing? You taking acting classes or something? I can assure you this is not. Wait. He held up his hand, still chuckling. Say, aluminum. Aluminium. Derek nearly choked on his own amusement. Oh my god. And schedule. Schedule. The pronunciation came out automatically, and I felt heat creep up my neck. This is gold. Absolute gold. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. How long you been practicing this act, Henderson? You trying to impress someone? That girl from accounting, what's her name, Sarah? Mr. Morrison, I'm experiencing what I believe may be a medical condition related to yesterday's accident. Foreign accent syndrome is a documented neurological. Foreign accent syndrome? Derek's voice pitched higher. You're telling me you hit your head and suddenly you're Prince William? Come on. The worst part was that I couldn't blame him for his skepticism. If someone had walked into my office yesterday speaking like they'd stepped out of a Jane Austen novel, I'd have assumed they were either joking or having some kind of breakdown. Nevertheless, I continued, my voice maintaining that infuriating composure, I require medical attention and proper documentation of the workplace hazard that caused my injury. The leak from the 3rd floor restroom has been reported multiple times over the past month. Derek's expression hardened. There's no leak. I'm rather certain there is. I personally submitted 3 maintenance requests between September 15th and October 2nd. The facilities log should reflect. The facilities log doesn't reflect jack shit, Henderson, because there's no actionable leak. A little condensation doesn't constitute a workplace hazard. I blinked. Condensation. Mr. Morrison, there was standing water covering approximately 6 square feet of hallway floor. I slipped because. You slipped because you weren't watching where you were going. Derek's voice had gone cold. Maybe if you spent less time perfecting your little accent routine and more time paying attention to your surroundings, you wouldn't have had an accident. The casual dismissal hit me harder than the filing cabinet had. 3 months of salary data processing. 14 overtime weekends since July. Perfect attendance for 2 years running. And this was how he responded to my first and only workplace injury. I see. The words came out quietly, each syllable precisely enunciated. And I suppose the security footage from yesterday afternoon would support your assessment. Something flickered across Derek's face, so quickly I almost missed it. Surprise. Concern. Security footage isn't your concern, Henderson. Your concern is getting back to work and dropping this workers' comp nonsense before it becomes a problem for both of us. He turned back to his computer, dismissing me with the casual cruelty of someone who'd never doubted his own authority. That'll be all. As I stood to leave, a thought crystallized with startling clarity. Derek Morrison Jr. was hiding something about yesterday's accident. And my new voice was going to help me find out exactly what. The rest of Tuesday passed in a blur of stifled snickers and not-so-subtle whispers. Every time I opened my mouth, conversation stopped. During the 2:30 p.m. departmental meeting, I watched Derek's smirk grow wider each time I spoke. "Henderson, why don't you update us on the Pemberton account?" he said, his voice dripping with false courtesy. "Certainly. The Pemberton file requires additional documentation before we can process their claim for the November 3rd incident. I've requested medical records from Northwestern Memorial, but they've yet to provide the necessary." "Jesus Christ," muttered Brad from accounting. "It's like having Sherlock Holmes read insurance reports." The conference room erupted in barely contained laughter. Even Maria, who usually had my back, covered her mouth to hide a smile. I felt my face burn with embarrassment, but my voice remained maddeningly composed. "As I was saying, the medical records should arrive by Thursday, after which we can." "Thank you, your lordship," Derek interrupted, earning another round of chuckles. "Anyone else have updates that don't require subtitles?" I spent the rest of the meeting in silence, taking notes while Derek basked in the attention. But something else nagged at me, something about his earlier reaction when I'd mentioned the security footage. The way his confident smirk had faltered for just a split second. After the meeting, I made my way to the building's security office on the second floor. Marcus Webb, the head of security, had always been friendly, a retired cop who treated everyone with the same gruff respect. "Jake." Marcus looked up from his bank of monitors. "Heard you had a spill yesterday. You okay?" "I'm recovering, thank you. Though I was hoping you might help me with something." The accent made even casual conversation sound formal. "I'd like to review the security footage from yesterday afternoon, around 3:45 p.m. Third floor hallway, near the elevator bank." Marcus frowned. "That's specific. Any particular reason?" I chose my words carefully. "There seems to be some disagreement about the circumstances of my accident. I thought the footage might clarify things for the incident report." "Incident report?" Marcus pulled up a screen on his computer. "Didn't see anything come through the system." "Derek file one yet?" "Not yet, I'm afraid." Marcus's frown deepened. "Standard protocol is to file within 24 hours of any workplace injury. Especially one that sent someone home early." He clicked through several screens. "Let me pull up yesterday's footage." I watched over his shoulder as he navigated to the correct timestamp. The third floor hallway appeared on screen in grainy black and white. At 3:42 p.m., I watched myself walk into frame, carrying a stack of files toward the elevator. "There," I pointed. "You can see the water on the floor." And there it was, a dark patch spreading across the hallway tile, exactly where I remembered it. On screen, my past self didn't notice it until too late. I watched myself slip, files scattering as I fell backward, my head connecting with the metal edge of the filing cabinet with a sickening thud. "Shit," Marcus muttered. "That's a nasty fall." "But Jake." He paused the footage and rewound it 15 minutes. "Look at this." At 3:27 p.m., Derek Morrison Jr. walked through the same hallway. He stopped directly in front of the water, looked around, then continued walking. No attempt to clean it up. No call to maintenance. No warning signs. He saw it, I breathed. "Oh, it gets better." Marcus fast-forwarded to 3:35 p.m. Derek appeared again, this time with Janet from reception. They stood talking for nearly 2 minutes, Derek gesturing animatedly about something. The water puddle sat clearly visible behind them. "Two separate occasions," Marcus said grimly. "Your boss knew about that hazard and did nothing." I stared at the frozen image on screen, Derek pointing at something off-camera while standing less than 3 feet from the water that would send me to the emergency room 8 minutes later. "Marcus," I said slowly, "I don't suppose you could provide me with a copy of this footage?" His smile was sharp as broken glass. "I don't suppose that would be a problem at all." Armed with the security footage burned onto a DVD that Marcus had helpfully labeled Third Floor Incident, October 15th, I returned to my desk with a newfound sense of purpose. Derek's deliberate negligence wasn't just unprofessional, it was potentially criminal. But as I sat staring at the disc, a more immediate problem presented itself. How exactly does one leverage security footage when speaking like a character from a period drama? The answer came sooner than expected. At 4:47 p.m., my desk phone rang. The caller ID showed an extension I didn't recognize from the executive floor. Jake Henderson speaking. "Mr. Henderson. This is Patricia Winters, assistant to Regional Director Coleman. Mr. Coleman would like to see you in his office at your earliest convenience." My stomach dropped. Regional Director Coleman, Derek's boss's boss, rarely spoke to anyone below management level. The last person I knew who got called to Coleman's office was Janet from reception, and that was only because she'd accidentally sent a company-wide email containing her grocery list. "Certainly. Shall I come up now?" "That would be perfect." 7th floor, corner office. The elevator ride felt eternal. I clutched the DVD in my jacket pocket like a talisman, running through possible scenarios. Had Derek complained about my attitude? Was I being fired for requesting workers' comp? By the time the elevator dinged at the 7th floor, my palms were sweating despite my voice's continued aristocratic composure. Patricia Winters turned out to be a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who looked like she could organize a military coup with nothing but color-coded spreadsheets. She gestured toward the imposing oak door behind her desk. "He's waiting for you." Regional Director Coleman's office was 3 times the size of Derek's, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Chicago. The man himself sat behind a mahogany desk that probably cost more than my annual salary, reviewing a thick folder with intense concentration. "Mr. Henderson," he said without looking up. "Please, sit down." I settled into the leather chair across from his desk, my accent making even my breathing sound pretentious. Coleman finally raised his eyes, pale blue and uncommonly sharp. "I've received some interesting reports about yesterday's incident on the 3rd floor." He leaned back in his chair. Your supervisor indicates you're claiming a workplace injury, but he seems skeptical about the legitimacy of your concerns. I see. I chose my words carefully. And what exactly has Mr. Morrison shared regarding the incident? He suggests you're experiencing some kind of personal crisis. Something about developing an unusual speech pattern and making unreasonable demands for medical compensation. Coleman's expression remained neutral. He's recommended we consider disciplinary action for what he calls disruptive workplace behavior. My blood pressure spiked, but my voice remained maddeningly calm. How fascinating. I wonder if Mr. Morrison mentioned the standing water in the third-floor hallway that caused my injury. Or perhaps his knowledge of said hazard prior to my accident. Something shifted in Coleman's expression. His knowledge of the hazard. Indeed. I reached into my jacket and withdrew the DVD. I've taken the liberty of reviewing the security footage from yesterday afternoon. I believe you'll find it rather illuminating regarding the circumstances of my injury and Mr. Morrison's subsequent response. Coleman took the disc, studying it with interest. You reviewed security footage? With Mr. Webb's assistance, naturally. Standard procedure for documenting workplace incidents, I believe. The accent lent an air of unshakable authority to my words. The footage clearly shows Mr. Morrison observing the water hazard on 2 separate occasions prior to my accident, with no attempt to address the danger or warn other employees. 2 separate occasions. 3:27 p.m. and 3:35 p.m., to be precise. My accident occurred at 3:42 p.m. I folded my hands in my lap. I'm certain a man of your experience can appreciate the liability implications of such negligence. Coleman inserted the DVD into his computer without breaking eye contact. Indeed I can. As the security footage played on his monitor, I watched his expression grow increasingly grim. When Derek appeared for the second time, clearly seeing the water hazard and doing nothing, Coleman's jaw tightened visibly. Mr. Henderson, he said quietly, I believe we need to have a much longer conversation. The conversation with Coleman stretched well past normal business hours. By 6:30 p.m., most of the office had emptied out, leaving only the cleaning crew and whatever unfortunate souls were pulling overtime. Coleman had called in Patricia to take notes, and somehow my accent made even the most mundane details sound like testimony at a parliamentary inquiry. Walk me through the maintenance requests again, Coleman said, leaning forward with his elbows on the desk. Certainly. The first was submitted on September 15th at 2:17 p.m. through the online facilities portal. Reference number FR 2847. The second on September 28th, reference FR 2891, and the third on October 2nd, reference FR 2923. The dates and numbers rolled off my tongue with mechanical precision. Each documented the recurring water accumulation in the third-floor hallway, specifically near the elevator bank. Patricia's fingers flew across her laptop keyboard. I'm showing all 3 requests in the system. Status on the first 2 shows, reviewed, no action required. The third shows, pending supervisor approval. Supervisor approval. Coleman's voice carried a dangerous edge. Since when do maintenance requests for safety hazards require supervisor approval? That policy change was implemented October 1st, Patricia said, scrolling through her screen. Memo from Derek Morrison Jr. to Facilities Management. All maintenance requests exceeding $50 estimated cost now require departmental supervisor sign-off. I felt a cold satisfaction settle in my chest. How remarkably coincidental that this policy change occurred precisely 1 day before my final maintenance request. Coleman's expression darkened further. Patricia, pull up the facility's budget reports for the third quarter. I want to see every maintenance request that's been delayed or denied since October 1st. While Patricia compiled the data, Coleman turned his attention back to me. Mr. Henderson, I have to ask, this accent of yours. Derek seems convinced it's some kind of performance. The question I've been dreading since morning. How do you convince someone that you've genuinely woken up speaking like BBC royalty without sounding completely unhinged? I understand Mr. Morrison's skepticism, I said carefully. However, foreign accent syndrome is a documented neurological condition that can result from traumatic brain injury. The University of Chicago Medical Center has several case studies. You've researched this extensively. Dr. Sarah Chen in the neurology department has published 3 papers on post-traumatic accent acquisition between 2019 and 2022. The condition affects approximately 0.005% of traumatic brain injury patients, typically manifesting within 24 to 48 hours of the initial trauma. Coleman and Patricia exchanged glances. My ability to cite specific medical research with perfect pronunciation seemed to carry more weight than Derek's accusations of theatrical performance. Patricia, Coleman said slowly, I want you to schedule Mr. Henderson for a full medical evaluation at Northwestern Memorial. Company insurance, full coverage. And I want Dr. Chen specifically if she's available. Of course. Patricia made more notes. Shall I also schedule the meeting with legal regarding the maintenance request delays? What meeting with legal? I asked. Coleman's smile was thin as razor wire. Mr. Henderson, your little research project has uncovered what appears to be a pattern of systematic negligence. According to Patricia's preliminary numbers, 17 maintenance requests have been delayed or denied since October 1st, including 6 classified as safety hazards. My pulse quickened. 17. Everything from broken emergency lighting in the stairwells to a malfunctioning lock on the roof access door. All delayed pending supervisor approval that mysteriously never comes. Coleman stood and walked to his window, gazing out at the darkening Chicago skyline. Tell me, in your professional opinion, what might motivate someone to deliberately obstruct safety maintenance? The implication hung in the air like smoke. I thought of Derek's expensive watch, his new BMW, the rumors about his gambling habits that he thought no one noticed. Cost savings would be the obvious answer, I said slowly. Though I couldn't speculate on anyone's specific motivations without more evidence. Of course not. You're far too professional for speculation. Coleman returned to his desk. Patricia, what's Derek's departmental budget performance this year? 12% under projected expenses. Best in the company. And his performance bonus is calculated how? Percentage of budget savings, plus productivity metrics. Coleman nodded grimly. So our Mr. Morrison stands to earn approximately $15,000 in bonus compensation this year, largely due to his remarkable ability to reduce maintenance costs. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. Derek wasn't just incompetent, he was actively endangering employee safety for personal financial gain. The delayed maintenance requests, the refusal to file incident reports, even his dismissive attitude toward my injury. It all served the same purpose, keeping his departmental expenses low enough to maximize his year-end bonus. There's something else, I said, remembering Derek's reaction that morning. When I mentioned the security footage earlier, Mr. Morrison seemed concerned. He insisted it wasn't my concern and warned me that pursuing workers' comp could become a problem for both of us. Patricia stopped typing. Coleman's expression went ice cold. He threatened you. Not explicitly. But the implication was rather clear. Coleman reached for his phone. Patricia, I want Derek Morrison Jr. in my office first thing tomorrow morning. And cancel his access to the facility's management system immediately. As I left Coleman's office at 7:15 p.m., the DVD tucked safely back in my pocket, I felt a strange mix of indication and uncertainty. Derek's house of cards was collapsing faster than I'd dared hope. But as my reflection caught in the elevator's polished steel doors, I barely recognized the person staring back at me. The face was familiar, but the bearing was entirely different, straighter posture, more confident expression, an air of quiet authority that hadn't existed 24 hours ago. Was this still me, or was I becoming someone else entirely? The elevator chimed softly as it descended, and I realized that tomorrow would bring answers I wasn't sure I was ready to face. The next morning brought an email that made my blood run cold, despite my voice's continued aristocratic composure. From Derek Morrison Jr. To Jake Henderson. Subject, disciplinary meeting. Sent, Wednesday, October 16th, 6:23 a.m. Asterisk Henderson, report to my office at 8 a.m. sharp. We need to discuss your behavior yesterday and the malicious lies you've been spreading to upper management. Bring your employee handbook and be prepared to explain why you shouldn't be terminated for insubordination and falsifying company records, asterisk. Derek. I read it twice, my coffee growing cold in my hands. Malicious lies. Falsifying records. The man's audacity was breathtaking, especially considering Coleman had explicitly told me Derek would be called upstairs this morning, apparently before Derek received that particular memo. At 7:47 a.m., I stood outside Derek's office with my employee handbook, watching him through his glass door. He was pacing behind his desk like a caged animal, occasionally stopping to gesture angrily at his computer screen. When he noticed me, his expression shifted to something resembling predatory satisfaction. Henderson. Get in here. Derek's office felt smaller today, charged with hostile energy. He positioned himself behind his desk like a general preparing for battle, his jaw set in determined lines. Sit down and shut up until I'm finished talking. He didn't wait for me to settle into the chair before launching his assault. I don't know what kind of game you think you're playing with this fake accent bullshit, but going behind my back to Coleman was a career-ending mistake. I opened my mouth to respond, but he held up his hand. I said shut up. Yesterday you deliberately accessed security footage without authorization, falsified information about maintenance requests, and attempted to file a fraudulent workers' compensation claim. That's grounds for immediate termination. I'm afraid I must disagree with your characterization of. Jesus Christ, drop the act. Derek slammed his palm on the desk. Nobody talks like that. You sound like a fucking Disney villain. The irony wasn't lost on me, considering Derek's current behavior could have been pulled straight from a cartoon about corporate corruption. But before I could respond, his desk phone rang. Derek glanced at the caller ID and his face went pale. Coleman's office, he muttered, then straightened his tie before answering. Derek Morrison speaking. I couldn't hear Patricia's words, but Derek's expression told me everything I needed to know. His confident aggression drained away like water from a broken dam. What? No, I'm currently meeting with. His eyes darted to me nervously. Yes, sir. Right away. Morrison has just provided us with some very interesting information about the facility's maintenance situation. I settled into my chair and waited. It seems, Coleman continued, that the maintenance delays were part of what he calls a cost optimization strategy. Apparently, delaying routine maintenance requests was meant to eliminate unnecessary expenses and improve departmental efficiency. Derek finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. I was trying to save the company money. By ignoring safety hazards. My accent made the question sound like a judicial inquiry. How remarkably short-sighted. Derek's head snapped up, his eyes blazing with desperate fury. This is all your fault. None of this would have happened if you just accepted that accidents happen instead of playing detective with your ridiculous fake accent. The outburst hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Coleman's expression could have frozen Lake Michigan. Mr. Morrison, he said quietly, you're dismissed. Security will escort you out. As Derek was led from the office in disgrace, I realized that my strange new voice hadn't just given me confidence, it had given me power. And tomorrow, I'd find out exactly how much. The news of Derek's termination spread through the office faster than a computer virus. By Thursday morning, I'd become something of an office legend, the mild-mannered insurance processor who'd taken down a corrupt supervisor with nothing but security footage and impeccable pronunciation. But legends, as I was quickly learning, came with unexpected complications. Jake. Sarah Chen from accounting cornered me at the coffee machine, her eyes bright with curiosity. Is it true you're getting Derek's job? I nearly choked on my Pike Place roast. I beg your pardon. The promotion. Everyone's saying Coleman is fast-tracking you to replace Derek as department supervisor. She leaned closer conspiratorially. Maria heard Patricia telling someone in HR that they need someone with integrity and attention to detail to clean up the mess. The coffee suddenly tasted like ashes. Department supervisor. That was a $73,000 per year position with actual authority, real responsibility, and, most importantly, the power to ensure something like Derek's safety negligence never happened again. But it was also a job that would require me to speak publicly, lead meetings, and interface with upper management on a daily basis. All while sounding like I should be announcing the Queen's arrival at Parliament. I haven't heard anything official, I managed, though my accent made even this deflection sound like a diplomatic statement. Well, you should probably check your email, Sarah grinned. Patricia sent something marked, confidential, about 20 minutes ago. My hands were trembling slightly as I opened my laptop back at my desk. There it was, sitting at the top of my inbox like a ticking bomb. From Patricia Winters. To Jake Henderson. Subject, confidential, management opportunity. Sent, Thursday, October 17th, 9:15 a.m. Mr. Henderson. Asterisk Regional Director Coleman would like to schedule a meeting at 2 p.m. today to discuss an immediate advancement opportunity within your department. Please confirm your availability, asterisk. Asterisk the position would involve supervisory responsibilities, a salary adjustment to $75,000 annually, and relocation to the corner office on the 4th floor. Given recent circumstances, Mr. Coleman is prepared to make this appointment effective Monday, October 21st, pending your acceptance, asterisk. Please reply at your earliest convenience. Best regards. Patricia Winters. $75,000. A $31,000 raise. Derek's old office with a window view and the door that actually closed. The chance to rebuild the entire department with proper safety protocols and actual human decency. All I had to do was accept that I might never sound like myself again. My desk phone rang at 11:47 a.m., jolting me from my spiral of calculations and self-doubt. Henderson speaking. Jake. It's Dr. Chen from Northwestern Memorial. The voice was professional but warm. I have the results from your neurological evaluation yesterday. My heart stopped. Yes. The MRI shows some minor swelling in your left temporal lobe, consistent with the concussion you sustained. However, the inflammation is already beginning to subside. She paused. The interesting thing is the specific location of the injury. It's affecting an area we call Broca's region, which is responsible for speech production and language processing. And the accent? Foreign accent syndrome caused by trauma to that exact region typically resolves itself within 2 to 8 weeks as the swelling decreases. Another pause. However, there's something else we need to discuss. Are you available to come in tomorrow morning? My mouth went dry. Is something wrong? Not wrong, exactly. But the pattern of your speech changes is unusual. Most FAS patients lose their original accent entirely and develop something approximating a foreign accent. Your case shows retention of American English vocabulary and syntax, but with consistently applied British phonological patterns. It's almost like your brain is choosing to maintain the accent rather than having it imposed by the injury. I processed her words with growing dread. Choosing to maintain it. In rare cases, patients find that their acquired accent provides certain psychological benefits, increased confidence, altered social interactions, perceived authority. The brain can essentially prefer the new speech pattern and resist returning to the original, even after the physical trauma heals. The implications hit me like a second filing cabinet to the skull. My accent might fade naturally in a few weeks, but only if I wanted it to. And with Coleman's offer sitting in my inbox and the entire office looking at me with newfound respect, the question was no longer whether I could go back to being regular Jake Henderson. The question was whether I wanted to. At 1:55 p.m., I stood outside Coleman's office again, my reflection in the polished elevator doors showing someone I was still learning to recognize. Straighter posture, more composed expression, and an air of quiet authority that commanded attention. In 3 minutes, I'd either accept the promotion and potentially commit to this new version of myself forever, or decline and risk losing the first real opportunity I'd had in my entire career. The elevator chimed softly, and I stepped out to face my future. Coleman's office felt different this time, less intimidating, more like a negotiation between equals. He gestured for me to sit in the same leather chair where Derek had received his termination notice just 24 hours earlier. Mr. Henderson, I'll cut straight to the point. We need someone to take over Derek's responsibilities immediately, and your handling of this situation has been exemplary. Coleman opened a manila folder on his desk. $75,000 annually, full supervisory authority over the insurance processing department, and a mandate to implement whatever safety protocols you deem necessary. I should have felt elated. Instead, a cold knot of anxiety settled in my stomach. I'm deeply honored by the offer, Mr. Coleman. However, I feel obligated to mention that my medical condition may be temporary. Your accent, you mean? Coleman leaned back in his chair. Frankly, that's been one of your greatest assets in this entire situation. The way you presented information, handled yourself under pressure, it commands respect. Because I sound like I went to Cambridge instead of Chicago State, I thought bitterly. Patricia tells me you have a neurology appointment tomorrow, Coleman continued. Whatever the doctors say, I want you to know this offer stands on your professional capabilities, not your pronunciation. Before I could respond, his desk phone buzzed. Mr. Coleman. I have Morrison and Associates head of legal on line 2. Something about reviewing Derek Morrison's termination procedures. Coleman's expression darkened. Tell them I'll call back in 10 minutes. He looked at me grimly. Derek's father is calling in favors. Senior partners, board members, anyone who'll listen. Apparently, his son's termination was hasty and potentially actionable. My blood chilled. Actionable. Derek Jr. is claiming he was terminated based on false accusations from a mentally unstable employee experiencing psychological delusions. Coleman's voice dripped with disgust. He wants his job back, your termination, and is threatening a lawsuit for wrongful dismissal. The room seemed to tilt slightly. But the security footage shows negligence, not criminal intent. Derek's legal team is arguing that maintenance delays are standard cost management practices, and your injury was due to your own carelessness. Coleman stood and began pacing. They're claiming your sudden personality change and delusional speech patterns make you an unreliable witness. I felt the walls closing in. Without my testimony and the maintenance request documentation, Derek's termination would look like corporate overreach. And if his father had enough influence to pressure the senior partners. There's more, Coleman said grimly. HR wants you to undergo a psychiatric evaluation before we can formalize any promotion. Standard procedure when an employee exhibits significant behavioral changes, they claim. The trap was elegant in its simplicity. If the psychiatric evaluation determined my accent was voluntary, a performance or psychological break, it would invalidate everything I'd reported about Derek. If they found it was genuine medical trauma, Derek's team would claim I was mentally incompetent to provide reliable testimony. When is this evaluation scheduled? I asked, my voice maintaining its infuriating composure despite the panic clawing at my chest. Monday morning. Same day your promotion would take effect. Coleman returned to his desk. Jake, I need you to understand something. I believe you completely, and I think Derek Morrison Jr. is a negligent, greedy little weasel who should be in jail, not filing lawsuits. But corporate politics is a different animal than simple right and wrong. I stared at the contract on Coleman's desk, my signature line blank, waiting for a decision that would determine not just my career, but potentially my entire identity. I have until tomorrow to decide. You have until tomorrow to decide if you want to fight for this, or if you prefer to return to your old position while we handle the legal complications. Coleman's expression was sympathetic but firm. Either way, that psychiatric evaluation is happening Monday morning. As I left his office, one thought echoed in my mind, Derek Morrison Jr. wasn't done with me yet. Friday morning brought two pieces of news that would reshape everything I thought I understood about my situation. The first arrived via email at 7:23 a.m., marked urgent from Dr. Chen at Northwestern Memorial. Asterisk Mr. Henderson, please call immediately regarding your test results. New information has emerged that significantly changes our understanding of your condition. This cannot wait until Monday's appointment, asterisk. The second came 20 minutes later, as I sat in my Honda Civic in the Morrison Building parking garage, dreading another day of whispered conversations and sideways glances. Jake Henderson speaking. Henderson, it's Marcus Webb from security. We need to talk, and not over the phone. Meet me in my office in 5 minutes, and take the stairs, avoid the elevators. Something in Marcus's voice made my stomach clench. Is everything all right? That's what we're going to find out. Marcus's security office felt like a bunker this morning, with multiple monitors displaying feeds from cameras throughout the building. He gestured for me to sit while he pulled up what looked like archived footage on his main screen. Jake, how much do you know about Derek Morrison Sr.? The question caught me off guard. Derek's father? Just that he's supposedly well-connected. Why? Marcus's expression was grim. Derek Morrison Sr. sits on the board of directors for Morrison and Associates. Has for 12 years. He's also the majority shareholder in the building management company that handles our maintenance contracts. Ice water flooded my veins. The maintenance contracts. Every delayed repair, every ignored safety hazard, every cost optimization Derek Jr. implemented, it all funneled money back to Daddy's company. The less Morrison and Associates spent on maintenance, the higher the profit margins for Morrison Building Services. Marcus pulled up a spreadsheet showing payment records. Jr. wasn't just padding his performance bonus. He was padding the family business. The scope of the corruption was staggering. How long has this been going on? Near as I can tell. At least 3 years. Maybe longer. Marcus switched to another screen showing email logs. But here's the really interesting part. Yesterday afternoon, someone accessed the security system remotely and tried to delete the footage from your accident. My heart stopped. Tried to delete it. Failed, because I'd already backed up everything to an external server. But the access came from Derek Jr.'s corporate account, the one that was supposed to be deactivated after his termination. Marcus leaned forward. Either Derek's ghost is haunting our servers, or someone gave him back his system access without authorization. The implications were terrifying. If Derek still had access to corporate systems, what else could he manipulate? Personnel files. Financial records. The very evidence I'd used to expose him. Marcus, I need to ask you something, and I know it sounds insane. I took a deep breath. Is there any way the water on the third floor wasn't accidental? Marcus stared at me for a long moment. What kind of question is that? The kind where someone might deliberately create a hazard to injure a specific person. The words sounded paranoid even with my posh accent lending them gravity. Someone who knew I'd submitted 3 maintenance requests. Someone who knew I took the same route to the elevator every day at 3:45 p.m. Instead of laughing, Marcus pulled up building access logs on another monitor. Derek Jr. badged into the third floor at 2:47 p.m. on October 15th, badged out at 3:15 p.m. According to the elevator logs, he went to the basement, where the building's main water shutoff valves are located. The room seemed to spin. Are you suggesting? I'm not suggesting anything yet. But I'm damn sure going to find out. Marcus began pulling up more footage. Jake, I need you to call Dr. Chen back right now. Something tells me her urgent news and this security breach aren't unrelated coincidences. My hands shook as I dialed Northwestern Memorial. Dr. Chen answered on the first ring. Mr. Henderson, thank God. I've been trying to reach you all morning. Her voice was tight with concern. Jake, someone called yesterday afternoon claiming to be from your insurance company. They requested all your medical records related to the head injury, including our preliminary assessment of your foreign accent syndrome diagnosis. Someone requested my records. They had your social security number, policy information, everything they needed to sound legitimate. But when I called your insurance company this morning to follow up, they had no record of any such request. Dr. Chen paused. Someone is very interested in your medical condition, and they're willing to commit fraud to access your private health information. Marcus and I exchanged glances. The net was tightening around us faster than I'd imagined possible. Dr. Chen, I said carefully, is there anything about my condition that someone might want to suppress or discredit? Actually, yes. That's why I called. Jake, your case isn't typical foreign accent syndrome. The brain scans show something far more interesting, and potentially valuable. My throat went dry. Valuable how? Your injury seems to have enhanced certain cognitive functions while changing your speech patterns. Pattern recognition, analytical thinking, verbal reasoning, they're all testing significantly higher than baseline normal. It's like the trauma rewired your brain for optimal performance. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. My newfound confidence, my ability to analyze Derek's corruption, the way I'd handled Coleman and Patricia, it wasn't just the accent giving me authority. My brain was literally working better than it ever had before. And Derek Morrison Sr. would do anything to make sure no one believed that was possible. The psychiatric evaluation loomed over my weekend like a storm cloud, but by Sunday evening, Marcus and I had assembled what we hoped was an unbreakable case. 3 external hard drives containing security footage, financial records showing the Morrison family's conflict of interest, and Dr. Chen's detailed medical assessment proving my cognitive enhancement was genuine. They're going to come at you hard tomorrow, Marcus warned as we sat in his basement office, surrounded by printouts and evidence folders. Morrison Sr. has been making calls all weekend. Word is they've hired Brennan and Associates, the firm that specializes in discrediting whistleblowers. I sipped my coffee, noting how even my caffeine consumption had become more refined since the accident. Where I used to gulp gas station swill, I now savored properly brewed Colombian beans. What's their likely strategy? Paint you as mentally unstable, claim the accent proves you're delusional, argue that your enhanced cognition is actually a symptom of brain damage affecting your judgment. Marcus pulled up an email on his laptop. I intercepted this from Derek Jr.'s supposedly deactivated account. They're planning to have you declared mentally incompetent. The email made my blood run cold. Derek had been busy over the weekend, coordinating with his father's legal team to systematically destroy my credibility. They'd found 3 previous Morrison and Associates employees who'd been terminated for insubordination after reporting safety violations. All had been subjected to mandatory psychiatric evaluations that had found them unfit for continued employment. It's a pattern, I realized, my accent making the revelation sound like a pronouncement from the bench. They've been silencing whistleblowers for years using psychiatric evaluations as a weapon. Gets worse. The psychiatrist they've requested for your evaluation? Dr. Richard Steinberg. He's performed 17 workplace psychiatric assessments in the past 5 years. Guess how many found the employee mentally stable? My stomach dropped. None. Exactly 0. Dr. Steinberg has a perfect track record of finding workplace-induced psychological disorders that conveniently invalidate any complaints the employee might have made. Marcus closed his laptop grimly. Jake, they're not trying to discredit your testimony. They're trying to have you committed. The room felt like it was closing in around me. Morrison Sr. wasn't just protecting his son's job, he was protecting a systematic corruption scheme worth potentially millions of dollars in fraudulent maintenance contracts. And I was the only person who could expose it. There has to be something we can do, I said, though my voice had lost some of its characteristic composure. Actually, there is. Marcus smiled for the first time all weekend. I made some calls to a friend at the FBI's white-collar crime division. Turns out they've been investigating Morrison Building Services for federal contracting fraud. Your little discovery just gave them probable cause for a full audit. Relief flooded through me like warm honey. The FBI is involved. As of this morning. Special Agent Patricia Reeves, and yes, before you ask, she thought it was hilarious that Derek's secretary has the same first name as the agent investigating his family. Marcus leaned back in his chair. They're requesting all the evidence we've compiled, and they've agreed to have their own medical examiner review Dr. Chen's assessment of your condition. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like we might actually win. But as I drove home Sunday night, practicing normal speech patterns in my rearview mirror one last time before tomorrow's evaluation, one question nagged at me: even if we exposed the Morrison family's corruption, even if I kept my job and my sanity, did I want to go back to being the person I was before? Because the truth was, I liked who I'd become. And that scared me more than any psychiatric evaluation ever could. Monday morning arrived with the weight of inevitability. The psychiatric evaluation was scheduled for 9 a.m. sharp, and as I sat in Dr. Steinberg's sterile waiting room at 8:47 a.m., I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking into an elaborate trap. The office itself was designed to intimidate: harsh fluorescent lighting, uncomfortable chairs, and motivational posters that felt more like warnings. Change your perspective, change your life, hung directly across from me, featuring a lone figure standing on a cliff edge. Subtle. Mr. Henderson. A thin man in his 60s emerged from the inner office. Dr. Steinberg looked exactly like Central Casting's idea of a corrupt psychiatrist: pinched face, wire-rimmed glasses, and the kind of patronizing smile that suggested he'd already written his report before meeting me. Good morning, doctor, I replied, my accent as crisp as ever. Please, come in. We have quite a lot to discuss. He gestured toward his office with theatrical concern. I understand you've been experiencing some unusual symptoms since your workplace accident. His office was a monument to academic credibility, diplomas covering every wall, medical journals stacked precisely on his desk, and a recording device positioned prominently between 2 chairs. Dr. Steinberg settled behind his desk and opened a thick folder labeled Henderson, Jacob, Preliminary Assessment. Before we begin, he said, adjusting his glasses, I want you to know that everything we discuss today is confidential and in your best interest. My only concern is your mental health and fitness to continue your employment responsibilities. The lie rolled off his tongue with practiced ease. I'd seen enough of his previous evaluations over the weekend to know his best interest typically involved finding employees mentally unfit for duty. I appreciate your concern, doctor. However, I should mention that my attorney has advised me that this evaluation is voluntary, and I'm free to terminate it at any time. I hadn't actually consulted an attorney, but my enhanced cognitive abilities had made short work of Illinois employment law over the weekend. Dr. Steinberg's smile flickered slightly. Of course. Though I should note that refusing to complete the evaluation might be interpreted unfavorably by your employer. Indeed. Shall we proceed? For the next 45 minutes, Dr. Steinberg attempted to lead me through a series of increasingly manipulative questions designed to establish mental instability. He probed my childhood trauma, quite normal, I'm afraid, my relationship history, nothing particularly dramatic to report, and my financial stress, well within manageable parameters, thank you. But it was his approach to the accent that revealed his true agenda. Now, Jacob, may I call you Jacob, let's discuss this remarkable change in your speech patterns. He leaned forward with false sympathy. How long have you been fantasizing about being someone else? I beg your pardon. The British accent, the elevated vocabulary, the sudden confidence, these are classic symptoms of dissociative identity disorder. Have you been experiencing blackouts? Memory gaps? Periods where you feel like you're watching someone else control your actions. The trap was elegant in its simplicity. Answer yes, and he'd diagnose me with multiple personality disorder. Answer no, and he'd claim I was consciously faking the accent, which would invalidate everything I'd reported about Derek. Doctor, I said carefully, are you familiar with the medical literature on foreign accent syndrome following traumatic brain injury? I'm familiar with that particular delusion, yes. His tone had gone cold. Many patients experiencing psychological breaks convince themselves their symptoms have exotic medical explanations rather than accepting the underlying mental illness. He was good, I had to give him that. But 48 hours of preparation with Marcus and Dr. Chen had armed me for exactly this moment. How fascinating. Then you're certainly aware of Dr. Sarah Chen's 2022 paper in the Journal of Neurological Sciences documenting 17 cases of post-traumatic accent acquisition with associated cognitive enhancement. I pulled out my phone and opened the article. Published just 6 months ago. Surely someone of your expertise would have reviewed the latest research before conducting this evaluation. Dr. Steinberg's face went ashen. He clearly hadn't expected me to cite specific medical literature that contradicted his predetermined diagnosis. Mr. Henderson, he said slowly, I think we should discuss your relationship with reality. That's when my phone buzzed with a text from Marcus, *FBI just arrived at Morrison Building. Game time, *. The text from Marcus sent electricity through my veins, but I maintained my composure as Dr. Steinberg continued his psychological assault. Your relationship with reality, Mr. Henderson, appears to be significantly compromised. He made a note in my file with deliberate emphasis. The grandiose behavior, the elaborate conspiracy theories about your employer, this obsessive research into obscure medical conditions, these are textbook symptoms of paranoid delusional disorder with narcissistic features. How remarkably convenient, I replied, setting my phone face down on the armrest. Tell me, doctor, in your professional opinion, would someone experiencing paranoid delusions be capable of uncovering systematic financial fraud spanning multiple years? Dr. Steinberg's pen froze mid-sentence. I'm sorry. The Morrison Building Services contracts. The artificially delayed maintenance requests. The coordination between Derek Morrison Jr. and his father's company to inflate profit margins through deliberate safety negligence. I leaned forward slightly. Are these the typical fantasies of someone experiencing a psychological break? The color drained from Dr. Steinberg's face. Either he was an excellent actor, or he genuinely hadn't been briefed on the specifics of the Morrison family's corruption scheme. Mr. Henderson, I think you're conflating workplace disagreements with elaborate criminal conspiracies. His desk phone rang, sharp and insistent. Dar. Steinberg glanced at the caller ID and his expression shifted to something approaching panic. Excuse me one moment. He answered with a trembling hand. Dr. Steinberg speaking. I couldn't hear the voice on the other end, but I watched Dr. Steinberg's face cycle through confusion, alarm, and finally resignation. I see. Yes, I understand. No, the evaluation is still in progress. He hung up and stared at me with something resembling awe. Mr. Henderson, that was Morrison and Associates legal department. They're postponing this evaluation pending some kind of federal investigation. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Marcus, * Derek Jr. just got arrested in the lobby. Handcuffs and everything. Half the office is recording it, *. Doctor, I said, standing to leave, I believe our session has concluded. But Dr. Steinberg wasn't finished. Wait. Please. His professional facade had cracked completely. The things you just mentioned, the building contracts, the maintenance fraud, how did you know about that? The same way I know you've conducted 17 previous workplace psychiatric evaluations, all of which conveniently found employees mentally unfit after they reported safety violations or financial irregularities. I gathered my jacket with deliberate calm. The same way I know Morrison Sr. pays your consulting firm approximately $47,000 annually for specialized workplace assessments. Dr. Steinberg's mouth opened and closed like a suffocating fish. That information isn't public record. No, it isn't. But it will be, once the FBI completes their audit of Morrison Building Services and their associated professional service providers. I paused at his office door. Doctor, you might want to consider consulting your own attorney. I suspect the federal investigators will have questions about your diagnostic methodologies. As I left Dr. Steinberg's office at 10:23 a.m., my phone rang with Coleman's extension. Henderson, where are you? Just finishing the psychiatric evaluation you requested, sir. Cancel it. Get back to the office immediately. We have FBI agents in a conference room asking about security footage and maintenance records. Derek Jr. is in federal custody, and Morrison Sr. just resigned from the board of directors. Coleman's voice carried a mixture of excitement and terror. Jake, what the hell did you uncover? I smiled as I walked toward my Honda Civic, finally understanding the full scope of what had started as a simple slip on a wet floor. Justice, Mr. Coleman. I believe I've uncovered justice. Well, you better get back here and help us explain it to the federal government. The FBI conference room at Morrison and Associates had been transformed into something resembling a war room. Special Agent Patricia Reeves, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who radiated the kind of quiet authority I was still learning to recognize, sat across from me with 3 bankers' boxes of evidence spread across the mahogany table. Mr. Henderson, Agent Reeves said, reviewing a thick folder, your security footage analysis has been quite helpful. But we need to discuss some inconsistencies in the timeline. My stomach tightened. What sort of inconsistencies? According to building records, Derek Morrison Jr. badged into the 3rd floor at 2:47 p.m. on October 15th, just as you reported. However, the basement access logs show something interesting. She pulled out a printed report. Someone accessed the main water control room at 3:02 p.m. that same day, but it wasn't Derek Jr. The blood drained from my face. Who was it? That's what we're trying to determine. The badge used was registered to a J. Patterson, a maintenance contractor who was supposedly terminated 6 months ago. Agent Reeves leaned forward. Mr. Henderson, is it possible someone else wanted you injured? Someone with access to deactivated employee badges? Before I could answer, Coleman burst through the conference room door, his face flushed with panic. Agent Reeves, we have a problem. Derek Morrison Sr. just filed an emergency injunction claiming this entire investigation is based on fabricated evidence provided by a mentally incompetent employee. He shot me an apologetic look. He's demanding Jake be placed on involuntary psychiatric hold pending a full competency evaluation. Agent Reeves didn't blink. On what grounds? Apparently Dr. Steinberg filed a preliminary report this morning stating that Mr. Henderson exhibits severe delusional paranoia with fabricated identity disorder. Coleman sat down heavily. Morrison Sr.'s legal team is arguing that anything Jake reported should be dismissed as the fantasies of someone experiencing a complete psychological break. My enhanced cognitive abilities kicked into overdrive, processing the implications. Morrison Sr. hadn't just been protecting his son's corruption, he'd been orchestrating a systematic campaign to have me declared insane from the moment I'd started asking questions. Agent Reeves, I said carefully, might I suggest that Dr. Steinberg's evaluation methodology warrants scrutiny? According to public court records, he's provided expert testimony in 43 civil cases over the past 5 years, all favoring defendants against employee plaintiffs. Agent Reeves made a note. You researched Dr. Steinberg's court history? Extensively. His pattern of diagnoses correlates remarkably with the financial interests of whoever retained his services. I pulled out my phone and opened a spreadsheet I'd compiled over the weekend. In 37 of those 43 cases, Dr. Steinberg found the plaintiff mentally unfit to provide reliable testimony. The average settlement reduction was 78%. Coleman stared at me. Jesus, Jake. When did you become Sherlock Holmes? Before I could answer, Agent Reeves' phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and her expression hardened. Gentlemen, we have a more immediate problem. Derek Morrison Jr. just posted bail. She stood and began gathering files. And according to Chicago PD, someone matching his description was seen entering this building through the parking garage 20 minutes ago. The conference room fell silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights. Coleman's face went pale. He's in the building. Right now. Possibly. Which means Mr. Henderson might be in immediate danger. Agent Reeves turned to me. Jake, is there anyone else who knew about your investigation into the maintenance records? Anyone who might have warned the Morrison family about what you discovered? The question hit me like ice water. Someone had been feeding information to the Morrisons from the beginning. Someone with access to my employee files, my medical records, and my security footage analysis. Someone who'd been playing both sides from the start. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, asterisk third floor hallway. Come alone. Time to finish what we started. J asterisk. The text from J made my blood freeze, but Agent Reeves was already moving, her hand reaching for her service weapon. Nobody goes anywhere alone, she said sharply, reading the message over my shoulder. That's exactly what they want. Coleman's face had gone white. J. Patterson, that's the deactivated badge from the basement access logs. Which means whoever's been orchestrating this has been using a dead identity from the beginning. Agent Reeves spoke rapidly into her radio. I need backup at Morrison and Associates, 4th floor. Suspect may be armed and desperate. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a photo, the 3rd floor hallway where I'd had my accident, but now there was something chilling about the image. A small device sat near the water fountain, barely visible unless you knew where to look. Agent Reeves, I said, my voice maintaining its steady accent despite the terror clawing at my chest, I believe that's a recording device. She examined the photo with professional intensity. Someone's been monitoring that location. Probably for weeks. Her radio crackled with confirmation that backup was en route. Mr. Henderson, how many people knew your exact routine? Your 3:45 p.m. elevator schedule. The implications hit me like a sledgehammer. The accident wasn't opportunistic. Someone studied my patterns, planted that recording device, and waited for the perfect moment to. To what? Deliberately cause your injury. Coleman looked between us desperately. But why? Jake's just a processor. He's not important enough to. No, I interrupted, pieces clicking into place with horrifying clarity. But I am now. The accent, the cognitive enhancement, the sudden ability to analyze complex financial fraud, someone knew this would happen. Agent Reeves stared at me. You're suggesting someone deliberately caused your brain injury knowing it would improve your mental capabilities. Dr. Chin mentioned that my specific injury location was statistically improbable. Trauma to the exact region that would cause foreign accent syndrome with cognitive enhancement occurs in less than 0.005% of concussion cases. My hands were shaking now. What if it wasn't random? What if someone needed a credible whistleblower with enhanced analytical abilities to expose Morrison's corruption? The conference room fell silent as the full scope of the manipulation became clear. Someone had orchestrated my injury, knowing it would transform me into the perfect weapon against the Morrison family's fraud scheme. My phone rang. Coleman's extension, but he was sitting right across from me, his own phone untouched on the table. Don't answer it, Agent Reeves warned, but I was already reaching for the device. Henderson speaking. Hello, Jake. The voice was familiar but distorted, processed through some kind of electronic filter. Enjoying your new cognitive abilities? Agent Reeves frantically gestured for me to keep the caller talking while she traced the signal. Who is this? I asked, though my enhanced pattern recognition was already assembling possibilities. Someone who's been watching Morrison and Associates steal federal maintenance contracts for 3 years. Someone who needed proof that would stand up in court. Someone who knew that Jacob Henderson, mild-mannered insurance processor, would never have the confidence or capability to expose systematic fraud. The cold calculation in the filtered voice made my skin crawl. You deliberately injured me. I gave you a gift. Enhanced cognition, unshakable confidence, and the perfect cover story, a medical condition that would make you sympathetic to investigators. A pause. Though I admit, the accent was an unexpected bonus. Really adds gravitas to your testimony, doesn't it? Agent Reeves was scribbling notes frantically, asterisk signal coming from inside building. 3rd floor, asterisk. But Derek Jr. posting bail wasn't part of your plan, I said, buying time. Derek Jr. is irrelevant now. The FBI has everything they need to dismantle Morrison Building Services completely. Morrison Sr. will be indicted within the week, and their federal contracts will be terminated. The voice carried satisfaction. Mission accomplished. Except now you have to clean up loose ends. Just one loose end, Jake. You were never supposed to figure out the injury was deliberate. That particular cognitive enhancement wasn't in the original specifications. The line went dead, and Agent Reeves looked up from her radio with grim determination. Signal originated from the third-floor security office. The person we're looking for has been right under our noses the entire time. My blood turned to ice as I realized who had access to employee schedules, security footage, deactivated badges, and detailed knowledge of the building's water systems. Marcus Webb wasn't my ally in this investigation. He was the puppet master who'd created me to destroy the Morrison family. And now that his mission was complete, I was the only witness who could expose him. The confrontation with Marcus in his security office unfolded like a chess match where I finally understood I'd been playing against a grandmaster. You've been remarkably efficient, Jake, Marcus said without turning around as Agent Reeves, Coleman, and I entered his basement office. His multiple monitors displayed feeds from throughout the building, including the empty third-floor hallway where this had all begun. Though I must admit, discovering my involvement wasn't part of the original plan. Original plan? Agent Reeves had her weapon drawn but not aimed. Mr. Webb, I need you to turn around slowly and explain what you mean by that. Marcus swiveled in his chair with the casual confidence of someone who'd already won. 3 years of watching Morrison Sr. steal federal maintenance contracts. 3 years of documenting evidence that no prosecutor would touch because it came from a disgruntled security guard with a grudge. He gestured to his wall of monitors. I needed someone credible. Someone whose testimony would carry weight. So you created me, I said, my accent making the accusation sound like a formal charge. Studied my routines, triggered a specific brain injury, and turned me into your perfect whistleblower. Foreign accent syndrome with cognitive enhancement occurs in exactly 0.005% of traumatic brain injuries, Marcus confirmed. But if you know precisely where and how to cause the trauma. He pulled out a tablet showing detailed neurological diagrams. Dar. Margaret Sutton at Johns Hopkins published a paper in 2019 identifying the exact impact angle and force required. Fascinating reading. Agent Reeves stepped closer. You deliberately caused Mr. Henderson's injury. I gave him everything he never knew he wanted. Confidence, intelligence, respect from his colleagues, a $75,000 promotion. Marcus smiled with genuine pride. Jake Henderson was invisible before October 15th. Now he's the hero who exposed systematic federal fraud. The most terrifying part was that he was right. The person I'd become, articulate, analytical, commanding, felt more authentic than the anxious, overlooked processor I'd been for 28 years. But why me specifically? I asked. Perfect positioning. You'd submitted those maintenance requests, establishing clear motive for investigation. You took the same route every day, making the accident predictable. And most importantly, you were completely forgettable. No one would suspect manipulation because no one had ever paid attention to Jacob Henderson before. Agent Reeves was studying Marcus with professional fascination. How did you access the basement water controls without your own badge showing up in the logs? J. Patterson's deactivated badge, obviously. Though I'm impressed Jake figured out that detail. Marcus pulled a plastic card from his wallet. Poor Patterson died in a car accident 8 months ago, but his building access was never properly purged from the system. Sloppy IT management. And Derek Jr.? Coleman asked. Was he part of this? Derek Jr. was exactly what he appeared to be, a greedy, incompetent nepotism hire who got in over his head. Perfect villain for Jake's hero story. Marcus began shutting down his computer systems. Though I admit, his father's legal counterattack was more sophisticated than anticipated. Agent Reeves moved closer to Marcus's desk. Mr. Webb, you're under arrest for conspiracy, assault, fraud, and about 12 federal charges I haven't thought of yet. But Marcus wasn't resisting. He stood calmly, hands visible, wearing the expression of someone who completed a complex project successfully. Agent Reeves, you'll find complete documentation of Morrison Building Services federal contract fraud in my desk drawer. 3 years of evidence that will secure convictions for Morrison Sr., Derek Jr., and 14 other co-conspirators. He looked at me with something resembling paternal pride. Jake's enhanced analytical abilities helped compile it beautifully. As the handcuffs clicked into place, Marcus offered me one final observation. The accent will fade in approximately 6 weeks as the neurological inflammation subsides. But the cognitive improvements are permanent. Consider it my parting gift. Agent Reeves led Marcus away, but his words echoed in the empty security office. I could choose to return to my original speech patterns, but I'd never be the invisible, anxious person I was before. The question now was who I wanted to become with my authentic voice, and whether that person would be worthy of the terrible price Marcus had paid to create him. 3 months later, I stood in Regional Director Coleman's office accepting the official promotion to Department Supervisor, at $78,000 annually, with a mandate to rebuild the entire safety protocol system. My accent had faded exactly as Dr. Chin predicted, but the confidence and analytical abilities remained. I sounded like Jake Henderson from Chicago again, but I thought like someone who could command respect and expose corruption. Marcus Webb received 15 years in federal prison. Derek Morrison Jr. got 8 years and forfeiture of all assets. Morrison Sr. died of a heart attack before trial, his company dissolved and assets distributed to defrauded government agencies. And me? I learned that sometimes the person you become through trauma, even deliberately inflicted trauma, can be more authentic than who you were before. I still drink Pike Place roast every morning, but now I order it with quiet confidence instead of mumbling anxiety. I still process insurance claims, but now I do it with the authority to ensure no one else gets hurt by systematic negligence. The British accent lasted 6 weeks and 4 days. The man it revealed has lasted far longer.